I want you to think about this situation. Imagine right now it's starting to get nice outside, and you're going to start going out regardless of this quarantine, or maybe the quarantine's lifted. You take your child out to the playground. Maybe you go out for a nice long walk. Maybe you get everybody together and you actually go down to the beach, or just for a drive because you've been locked up for so long. Imagine how nice that's going to be. Now I want you to imagine something else that could quite possibly happen. The unthinkable. While you're gone, somebody who's been watching and casing your neighborhood breaks in your house and steals everything. Or maybe you go to the park with your child, and while you turn around in conversation because you're so happy, a pedophile takes your child. How do you prevent something like this from happening? By preparing right now. Don't wait until things get back to normal. Go get Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and its 2 accompanying workbooks, and do the threat assessments on yourself from the attacker's point of view. And for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans are at teamlittlebigs.com. This is how you prepare yourself for then. Don't wait. Order them now. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and its 2 accompanying workbooks, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. And for the children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that you download for free at teamlittlebigs.com. Go check it out. Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. You know, normally I don't start the show like this. I start it with a soundbite if I can find one. And I do have a soundbite, but I wanted to intro this soundbite because we end up talking about this in the show. And it's very important for law enforcement to realize what happens when they stand with the Constitution and stand with the people. And if enough officers, I keep saying this about everything else out there, if enough officers stand together, these tyrannical governors and mayors and incompetent politicians would not be able to do the things that they've been doing if enough law enforcement stood together. This is the way it was meant to be, baby. You guys got to start standing together and stop with these attitudes. Listen to this. On the sad note, this same police department where this fine, upstanding officer exists in Belmar, New Jersey, ends up turning around and arresting somebody for being at a gym. Give me a freaking break. But listen to this, because this is what happens when law enforcement and the people who are protesting their right to be out there, when they work together and don't go rushing in and bombarding people and arresting them like they're criminals. Let's take a listen to this.
Speak your piece and don't worry about it.
We are and we're only here for everybody's safety today. We plan for the worst, hope for the best, and it seems like that's what we have out here today.
Yes.
Formally, you are all in violation of the executive order. On that note, have a good day. Everybody be safe.
This is Jonathan Gilliam back in on the Experts Podcast. And as always, the media is all over the place. And now we have more experts, doctors, coming out and saying now 600 doctors signed a letter to the president saying that he should open up everything, because if he keeps it closed, it's going to kill more people than the virus. It's interesting. I mean, listen, I support opening up the nation. I've kind of outlined that, in my reasons why I believe that it should be opened, and we gave it a good shot. But the motivation of everybody, I'm very suspect of everybody's motivation now. You know, when it comes to these doctors and they're saying what they're saying, I'll pull it up here in just a second. It just makes you wonder. It makes you wonder because it just seems like now that everybody is in a position where they're either scared that they're going to get sick, they just believe that they know everything, or they have a stake in it, whether it be political or it be financial, because maybe perhaps they have a business that they want to open. And, you know, if it's a gym owner, and there's been a couple gym owners that have been harassed, and I'm going to try to have some of them. I know I'm going to have one, at least it's from upstate New York, that's going to come on. But there's several others. One guy in North Carolina, I believe it is, and I don't know if I can get a hold of him or not, but it's outrageous what's been done to him. And I'm going to talk about law enforcement again. I've talked about this several times over the past couple of weeks, but not that everybody's going to listen to me, but this is something that I just can't say enough about law enforcement. I'm going to get into that in a minute, but people's motivation, you know, if it's a gym owner or a small business owner, I get it, you know, and some of these doctors are small business owners, but I'm just suspect of people's motivations nowadays. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just very suspect of, are they really concerned about people, or are they concerned about their own well-being? And the reason I bring that up is because it's very interesting. I'm seeing now that, and I've been tweeting up a storm at night. It's when I'm most creative, but about the Drudge Report. It's always, no matter how popular the president gets, his approval on Drudge never gets above 50%. It's always around 41% or something like that. So anyway, I scour all these news sites, and the thing about Drudge is it's so far left, and it didn't used to be that way, but it's so far left that it gives you a good overview of what people that are liberal think, because that's all it covers. It's an aggregate, so it takes from all the different liberal stories from all over the world, and it puts them in there. And so I rely heavily a lot on that to go and see if I can weed out the stories. Drudge is just an aggregate, so it's an easy place for me to go. Instead of scouring all the liberal places, I can go there, and I can really. It's interesting. If I go to Fox, it's more difficult a lot of the time, not really now, but it used to be, or other conservative sites. I'm not going to say it's difficult, but it would be more difficult for me to actually determine, based on my training experience, what is the truth in some of these stories, because they do have experts in there on Fox, but also the way things are written are typically written from a perspective of not trying to demean the president. That's all that seems like the left does in any of their news stories. It's just demean the president. So when you take that out of it, and you go to these other very few conservative news websites, it's more difficult actually to see what the truth is behind a story. When I go to the liberal sites, it's automatic that the majority of that story is going to be, look at the president, he's a fool. Look at the president, don't trust him. Look at the president, he's failed us all. You remove that, and there's very little truth, if any truth, but the story is in there. There's something going on for them to say what they're saying. For instance, let me bring this up real quick. Let me go to Drudge right now. I'll go to Drudge, and I'm going to bring this up. Stand with me here. And which one was it here? It said that, yes, okay. Payback. Dems warn Republicans they will regret backing Trump's defiance of congressional oversight. right? And this comes from SFgate, which is a San Francisco online publication. I don't know if they have a paper publication, but it comes from there. And so when I look at this, I automatically know that the majority of the story is going to end up being something about how bad the president is and what he's causing. So as I read through the story, I can start to pinpoint the reality of what's happening much easier, because it's not like I'm looking for facts in here of wrongdoings by the Republicans as much as I am motivation of the Democrats. And here's the story that I got out of that one. I got out of that story that politicians, both on the left and the right, are still playing politics. They're playing politics, and I'm sure that's no surprise to you, but it is, I think it's a huge statement about the reality of, one, how seriously they take this epidemic, this crisis that's going through the world and this country. And I'm not just talking about a virus. I'm talking about the reality that no one was prepared for. How can you not be prepared for something like this? Happens every, I don't know, 20 years, it seems like we have another virus come through, or every 100 years, something really catastrophic. And yet, with all the technology and all the agencies, nobody is prepared for this. So they don't even seem to be concerned about that. I mean, what if, I'm just throwing this out there. What if a new virus forms? It's not like the viruses are standing in line like, buses that are pulling into a bus station or cabs where the other virus won't go forward until the other one gets out of the way. That's not the way nature works. It could be on some crazy scale of statistics that this could happen. Another virus could come along. You haven't even seen any politicians talking about how are we going to prepare for the next one? What if one comes? They're not even thinking that way. And trust me, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, it happens to me all the time. If I'm sitting there and I'm in conversation in front of a TV and I say a word and they say it at the same time on the television, if that can happen, or I read it at the same time somebody says it on the television, if that can happen, or this happens all the time. You're watching a TV show in the afternoon, and then you go out somewhere for like 5 hours, and then you come home and you turn the TV on, and it's in the exact same place that it was when you left, like they're repeating their shows. How many of you have ever had that happen? If that can happen, then another virus could occur while this virus is happening. It can happen. People always say the lottery, the odds are too great. You're not going to win. Why even play? Well, somebody always wins eventually. One person. It doesn't matter if the odds are 10 billion to 1. One person will eventually win that lottery. So this could happen. And I'm not trying to bring this up to scare anybody. I'm just saying that when we look at politicians and we look at that story that I just pointed out, what we see in there is that Washington, D.C. and the agencies and all these people and I'm a big General Flynn fan, but this is like all the rage now about General Flynn and whether or not he should, and a lot of people are focused on this. I give Q people a ration of crap all the time because and I need to have a whole show on that, how it's ridiculous and stupid and you're being led astray. But people get so focused on General Flynn, and I want General Flynn to be, it should be as easy as the DOJ was nefarious in their intent, and they obviously were trying to conspire to oust the president, and General Flynn didn't actually lie. He just didn't say things, recollect things, and they used that to say it's a lie. I know somebody who was an FBI agent. That happened to them, and they got arrested. Later, the charges were dropped because they said something, were you here? And they said on this date, and he's like, I may have been there on that date, but most likely it was on this other date. Well, it wasn't. It was on that date. And they charged him with lying under oath. So my hope is that Flynn gets, everything's dropped and he goes on. But here's the thing, all these people jump from thing to thing to get all hyped about. They didn't even realize that Barr came out and said that with as far as Clinton and Comey and all these people, he literally said, there was a statement where he said, most likely no one is going to be prosecuted. I didn't see, I'm on social media every day. I didn't see any Q people saying, whoa, what about this plan we've been screaming about for over 3 years? The plan's happened, the storm's coming. I didn't see anybody scream about that. Now, of course, they're going to turn around and say, that's just Barr. Barr's saying that because he's leading them down this path. That's how cult people think. But that is a story. That is a story that was just quickly missed. Catherine Herridge, who I know and who got me into media, basically. I mean, it's not like she sought me out and got me into media, but was responsible for passing my resume around because she had done a story that I was involved with when I was in the FBI, and that's how I met her. And if you want to see that report, you can go to my YouTube page, Jonathan T. Gilliam, and you'll see the report that she did on the special events unit for the Times Square in 2010. And I was the special events coordinator, so I was in charge of liaisoning and doing the operations order and the threat assessments and all this stuff for New York City for the FBI. And so she came, did a story, and that's how I met her. And then in 2013, when I got out and the Boston bombing happened, I wrote her an email and said, hey, I don't know if you remember me. You did this story, but I'm out of the Bureau now. If you need any information or analysis, I may be able to help you out. Let me know. I wasn't even trying to get on TV. I was just going to help her out. And as it turns out, 45 minutes later after sending that email, I was on Fox News for about 5 minutes and took 2 breaths. But the point is, through all this, Catherine Herridge she's really good at what she does. She is a credible reporter. She isn't out. Her motivation is not fame. Her motivation is not ideologically driven. She is a journalist, and she's one of the few that I actually know. And she has incredible insight because of the life she's lived and the relationships that she has. She is very well versed on the way things work in DC, but she approaches everything like an attorney. I mean, or like an investigator. She doesn't, use anonymous sources. She doesn't quote stuff that's not true, and she's really good at what she does. But she's being blasted because of the way that she's looking into this stuff and reporting it. If you ever want to know the truth about something, if she's reporting it, it's the truth. So going back to this story about the Democrats saying they're going to, hand it to the Republicans for backing Trump and blocking some of the stuff that they're wanting to do, the story there for me is that it's politics as usual when the rest of us are being, and this just goes across the board, it's Republicans, Democrats playing this game. Elections are coming up. They're playing the game big time. I mean, all this stuff, I wouldn't even care if they said, let's pause the elections until we get this figured out. I mean, real operational people would be like, listen, I want to win this election as bad as anybody, but let's pause for a minute and let's figure this out so we can have real elections. People can actually vote on who they want and real candidates. But of course they're not going to do that because it's all trickery and smoke and mirrors. So that's what I see when I see that story. And I hope that kind of gives you some insight on how I look at things. And yes, I have training and experience in investigations. Yes, I've worked for 4 federal agencies, and I studied politics, political science, and psychology. So I know these things. I kind of have a very good educated idea on the way that nefarious people work and the way Washington, D.C. works. And I see that. And I also know how the media works. I've been working in and around media since 2013 when I got out of the FBI. So I see this and I look at it from the investigator's point of view, but also with this experience behind my belt. Now, you don't necessarily have to have my experience to look in there. If you are a constitutionalist and if you're somebody who's ever been screwed over by anybody, I always, whenever I was, I'd take phone calls when we were worked in the operations center. When you're a new agent in New York City, you have to work in the operations center for a period of time answering phones, and you get crazy phone calls of people calling in. And I always try to, even though they're wanting me to give them advice, I always ask them, what do you think is happening? If I have time to talk like that. And one person in particular had called, I don't remember what time it was. I think it was in the evening. When you're in the operations center, there's no window, so I didn't really know what time it was. And I'm pretty sure it was in the evening. And I'm sitting there, and I get a phone call, and it's from a female who had been met a guy on online dating. And this wasn't a young girl. This was a woman. I don't know her real age, but she was not a young girl. And she had met a guy online and had started going out with this guy. And mostly online, they were dating through the phone and stuff. And so they had met a couple times, because I was, as I'm interviewing her, I'm asking these questions. Have you met? How well do you know this guy? And she said, well, I know him pretty well. And I'm wondering where this story is going, because she hasn't really told me exactly what occurred. And I said, okay, so where is this going? Are you okay? She said, yes, I'm fine. But here's the deal. The guy told me when we first started seeing each other, and she had met him again online, that he went around the world opening orphanages, because he's such a good guy, That's the way it always is, online dating. Isn't it just like that? So many incredibly good people are online, and they're all truthful about their profiles. So this guy was supposedly somebody who went around the world opening orphanages, and that's how he made his living. And, he was a servant of God opening up orphanages. So he asked her, the story didn't make any sense right off the bat. He said that he was going to move to America, and he was going to open up an orphanage here and get things started here. And the problem was that he couldn't deposit money in an American bank because he was a foreign national. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems like if you're going around opening orphanages, that would be something that you're really good at this point, is putting money into banks in other nations that are donations or whatever, so that you can do this charitable thing. But he was having a difficult time opening up a bank account in the United States. If you have a brain in your body right now, you're already starting to question, what the heck? Why didn't she see these signs? But listen, when you're in love, or your internet love, I guess you miss things, right? So she says, okay, well, how can I help? And he says, well, you have a bank account, right? And she's like, yes. He goes, well, could I deposit money into your bank account, and then when I get there, you can just write me a check for it? And, kind of like a payment or something, I guess, So she was like, first she was kind of hesitant, but then she said she thought it would be, she was thinking $25,000 at the most, that this guy would put in her account. And again, she had some relationships with this guy. So it wasn't like what you see in 90 Day Fiance of people who've never met somebody for 5 years. They had actually met a couple times and had a romantic, intimate relationship, and those few times that they met. And so she went to bed after that phone call with the guy, and got up the next morning. And when she checked her account, there was $1 million in her checking account. $1 million was right just below 900 and something thousand. I think it was either 800 and 900,000, but right at $1 million in her bank account. Now, I don't know about you, but I would probably be dropping some major bricks out of my backside at that point, knowing that she was smart enough to know that she was scammed. She was smart enough to realize that. At that point, she said that she knew something was wrong, because if he had $1 million, wouldn't he be able to make the right moves, get the right attorney, so that he could deposit this money without any go-arounds? And she was confused at what she should do at this point. Contact the bank, close her account, and if it was legit or if it sounded like this was a scam. And so I asked her, just like I'm telling you when you look at these news stories, I said, what does your gut feeling out of all the experiences that you've ever had in your life where people have done good things for you and people have done bad things to you, you know, you develop a sense for what is legit and what's not. Anybody does. If you're over the age of, well, this is a different day and age, but I figure if you're over the age of 25, maybe even younger, you've kind of been duped, right? And you're kind of starting to get it. I know women at around the age of 24 start to get it. I think guys, it takes them a lot longer, to be honest with you. But I asked her that question. I said, what do you see here? Before I even say what my opinion is, what do you see here? And she said, it's obviously there's a scam here. There's something going on and I don't know what it is. And I'm afraid to make a move, because I'm afraid it's going to, you know, I'm going to be in trouble. And I said, well, first of all, you're not going to be in trouble if you do the right thing. The right thing would be contacting your bank, telling them what's happened, and having them freeze your account. And most likely what's going to happen is the guy's either going to disappear or he's going to call you and try to intimidate you to get that money. But the money's not real. And this is what I explained to her. See, this is where my knowledge was far greater than her knowledge, but yet we were reaching the same conclusion. She didn't have to have my knowledge in order to reach that conclusion. It was odd, and she felt it. And she, you know, most people know that people don't just go around throwing $1 million in somebody's bank account because they want to open an orphanage. There's no story that's that good, and there's no way that somebody's going to, entrust $1 million to somebody that they've gone out on some dates with. I mean, unless they got Bill Gates money, you know. So I tell her that the way this whole scam, this is a Nigerian type scam. And what happens is there are fake banks that online and through paper, because they can print up the same things that we do. Scammers, you know, in Nigeria aren't held to the standards that our banks are held to here. I mean, the legal system may say over there, you know, they may put in paperwork, say I'm a bank, and they can print out all this stuff, but there's no bank transactions going on there. It's all criminal. And so he may have deposited what looks like $1 million on the computer screen, but the reality is there's no bank backing up that money. So what would happen, and I tried to tell her this, or she took the advice, is that if she withdrew that money, she would now be criminally liable in the end for that money, most likely. She could say that, you know, I didn't know this or I didn't know that, but when she takes the money out and he disappears, if not criminally, she would be financially responsible for paying the bank back the fake amount, that fake money, because the bank is actually going to discharge $1 million real dollars to her to give to this guy. He leaves. Now she's in hock to the bank for $1 million of real money. And this is partly the bank's fault for, you know, not doing their due diligence. And this was Bank of America, just so you know. And they didn't do their due diligence. And this happens a lot, happens all the time. So I told her, here's the important thing. And I'm telling you all this so that you have this lesson along with the other lesson I'm teaching you about media, is that if a Nigerian scam ever happens to you, and they do happen every now and then, I mean, I pray that you have the insight to not fall for these things. Like if somebody calls you and says, hey, I see that you have that truck for sale online. I'm not in country right now, but my cousin is, and I see you're asking $25,000 for it, but I only have one cashier's check for $40,000. So how about this? How about I give you the cashier's check for $40,000? I'm not worried about the extra because I really like that vehicle. So I will buy it for $30,000, and you just refund my cousin or nephew the other $10,000 that's on this from this cashier's check. And people fall for that. And what happens is, that person then takes the vehicle, and then now they're in hock to the bank for $40,000 and they have no vehicle because they got scammed. And things like this happen a lot, especially to the elderly that aren't hip to these types of scams. But the important thing is, if you ever got scammed, before you go to the bank, you need to determine how much money you had before you did this thing. Like, let's say you have, and when they do this in these scams, it's not like they're going to deliver the cashier's check to you. That's going to be deposited just like it was for this woman. It was deposited electronically. And so you need to determine how much money you had in the account already, withdraw that money, and then tell the bank and have them freeze your account. Because what's going to happen, and I also had phone calls from other people wanting to know if what legal, of course, I can't answer these things in the bureau because I'm not an attorney. And I'd say, well, it sounds to me like the bank got your money and you need to, talk to an attorney. That's what I would tell them. But what would happen ultimately, let's say that you got scammed for $40,000 and you had $32,000 in the bank. They're going to freeze your account for all of that, even your $32,000. So if you get scammed, you need to make sure you go and take out the money that was actually yours before you tell the bank, because they're going to freeze your whole account and you won't be able to get any out. And in the case of the other person that called, they were never able to get their money back from the bank, at least while I was talking to them. Maybe they went and got an attorney and got involved that way. So this woman, on her better judgment, she made the phone call and called in. And when she talked to me, and I, having more experience dealing with these types of scams and understanding how the system works, I didn't tell her until I asked her, what do you feel in your gut? And she was able to tell me exactly what I saw with no experience of ever having been scammed before. Because most people that reach a certain age have the ability, through circumstances that have happened or watching the news or seeing what's going on in the world. I mean, what we're learning about politics now is what, kind of like what we learned about fundamental Islam over the past 19 years. Everybody learned the reality of that loving religion and the reality of the people who fundamentally worship in it and how they're willing to kill and behead and do all kinds of crazy things. So it's the same thing here. People are starting to get it and understand about politics and say, I may have never been a politician. I may not be an attorney, but I can sure see the way nothing gets fixed, the way that the Democrats and Republicans, they hem and haw and they battle each other, but somehow they all end up coming out on top together. People are starting to see that over years and years and years. Social media has made it more evident. Regular media has made it more evident. And so now the people get it. And so you can make these educated decisions yourself. You don't have to follow somebody that has it's actually a group of people, I believe, that's call themselves Q. You don't have to follow somebody with a letter, or some kind of mysterious plan. We are smart enough to see what reality is. And when it comes to these scammers, and this is why I was so hard on people about Judy Mikovits, the lady from the Plandemic video, the reason I was so hard on people about that and went toe to toe with them on social media is because when I look at the way she presented her story and the background of the people that were involved with that video, the people that she associates herself with, are all scammers. And you don't put yourself into that position unless you too typically are a scammer. And the way that she presented the whole thing, some of her facts were correct. A lot of her facts were not correct. And if you're an expert in your field, that's not going to be the case. You're not going to say that Ebola didn't show its face until this date when it actually was back in the 70s. You don't say things about training viruses and stuff that's not true if you're an expert in that field. I'm not an expert in that field when it comes to that. I actually didn't know the stuff about Ebola and about the other things she said about viruses until Real Politidiva. You should follow her on Twitter. Until she has a degree in master's degree in education and a degree in biology. she came and sat down and went through this whole thing and wrote it out about the reality of the stuff that she was saying, how it didn't mesh up. And then I got 2 other people writing me that actually work in that industry. I mean, that are scientists in that industry, knew of her and said, this, and this is wrong about what she said. And from a scientific point of view, and all 3 of those people, Politidiva and these other 2 people, it all jived, and they didn't know each other. It was all independent people writing me. And so I take their word from an expert's point of view, but my expertise is looking at people and their stories and the way that they minimize the things that they've done. And she's a criminal. She's minimized everything that she's done when it comes to stealing information. And I know people, because I've had these people, you can't tell certain people anything. They'll constantly come back and say, well, how do you know that? How do you know that she didn't actually, or she was framed? She said she was framed. Yeah, a lot of people say that they're framed. Go to a prison, interview 1,000 people. All 1,000 of them are framed. And a small percentage of them probably were, but the rest of them were not. What movie was that? I think it was with Eddie Murphy. And they said, he yelled at, no, it might have been Shawshank Redemption, where they yelled at, are you innocent? Yeah, I'm innocent. I didn't do that. I was framed. They kept asking everybody that. When somebody is telling about a circumstance, and you can listen, go on, listen to Elizabeth Smart's story on, go on YouTube and listen to her story when she got kidnapped and abducted and was, gone for 8 months from her home. Listen to her story. Listen to how she tells that story. Or listen to somebody who was wrongfully imprisoned. Listen to their story. A rape victim. Listen to their story on YouTube. And what you're going to see is, you're not going to see people minimize what they did, right? You're going to see, not to say that Elizabeth Smarter and these people are guilty of stuff, but when somebody who's a victim tells their story, there's no minimization, right? Let's say she really saw something bad, which she probably did. Let's say she saw something really, really bad in the pharmaceuticals industry. And so she took this information, she's going to share it with the public. Well, it's the same thing as Snowden, for instance. What he did was illegal, taking that information. As you can see, it didn't really add up to anything, what he did. He makes himself sound like a hero, but he's not a hero. I mean, he got people killed, probably, most likely, with the information he took, and didn't change a whole lot of stuff. There'll be people arguing with me on that, but it really didn't change a whole lot of stuff. But when you hear him speak of what he did, he minimizes all the way through it. And the way he does it is by saying that, well, the government does this and they do this, and you send your pictures out and they have those things. And that may very well be true. But he also went in and took classified information off of government servers and he's not the only one. All these other individuals have done the same thing. They're criminal. But they'll constantly guide you back over to the fact that, that the government's bad and the government did this. Well, they are too. But that's how minimization works. When you interview criminals, you see it all the time. I've literally sat and watched people commit crimes. You arrest them, you bring them in, and then they minimize their whole involvement. And you're like, I watched the whole thing. I remember a great story. I'm not going to say the names of people who were involved, but I was on a criminal squad, and there had been somebody that was working an undercover position in this case, and they were not exposed at all. So the bad guy did not know who they were, and we have the bad guy now. And the way it works with bad guys is, you arrest the bad guy for doing something bad. One of the first things you want to do is work on him a little bit to see if you can get information about the bigger picture, because there's very few masterminds like Dr. Evil that is the top pinnacle of their evilness. There's always somebody over them and bigger things that can be hatched out of a case. So we're interviewing this guy, me and another guy. We're interviewing him, and he's stonewalling. He's minimizing everything that he's done. And we keep telling him, listen, you've got to start being more honest with us, because you're looking at a lot of time here. I mean, we're not talking about 5 years. You're looking at 30, 40 years for what you've done. And you probably need to start getting on board with us, because we're the FBI and we don't arrest you until we know you're guilty. I mean, we've done our due diligence. We've done our investigating, and we know you've done this, and this. And he's like, no, I haven't done that. You got it all wrong. And we're like, okay, hold on one second. Step outside, come back in. And the person that he'd been working with on certain things to do his criminal behavior steps in the door and says, hey, how you doing? It's got a badge wrapped around his neck. Says, you remember me? And the guy turned white. And at that point, he decided, oh, I think I'll work with you guys. But even then, it's still minimized. Bad people minimize what they do until they get to jail. Then they brag about it. So when I saw, and I'll tell you where I'm going with all this. I mean, I know I'm going all the way around the world to get to this point, and I want to keep reiterating this point. But when somebody that has a certain level of experience, especially in investigating and having dealt with these people, like, I'm not going to go and tell a teacher that teaches 10-year-olds, or 10th graders, even though I went through 10th grade and I have a certain amount of experience in understanding how 10th graders act, because I was one. So I have a certain level of expertise, as do all of you. But teachers that have been doing it for 20 years teaching 10th graders or 10-year-olds, I'm not going to go in and try to tell them what's effective and what's not. I would rather sit and listen to the stories that they have. And if I have a problem with a 10th grader, or maybe I arrested somebody who was, a 10th grader or a 10th grade teacher, I'm going to go to those people that I know that are in that field. And I'm going to ask them. But I can, based on my 10th grade experience when I was in 10th grade, I can come to a conclusion that may actually be the same as what the teacher would say, even though she has 20 years of experience, or he. It's the same thing here. It's the same thing here. When I listened to that woman and on that video of Plandemic, and she spewed on about all this stuff, and they did this wrong, and Fauci and this, and the pharmaceutical industry, and they framed me for stealing this stuff. And then you look at the news reports, and then you see the way she kept minimizing that stuff, on top of the fact that she has a book coming out, and people are saying, well, she doesn't make money off that. Listen, folks, people who write books and say they're not making money off of their books, they're still making money. They're going to be on boards. They made the video, which means she gets recognition, which means she gets in speaking engagements, making, $5,000 to $20,000 a speaking engagement. There'll be more books. They go and buy their books and then sell those books without, the profit being shown for what the book sold in the bookstore. There's all kinds of ways that people make thousands and thousands of dollars. Again, I have knowledge in that stuff because I've worked in all those fields. You may not have, but it's important for you to realize two things. When an expert steps forward, it doesn't mean they're always truthful, but it means that you can listen to what they say. And in the case of, like, with these liberal news sites, do they have an agenda? And if they have an agenda, then it automatically negates the majority of stuff that they're going to come up with that has to do with that topic that they're analyzing. That's the first thing. The other thing is, you have a brain and you have a tremendous amount of experience just in life, and you can come to your own conclusions that are probably going to meet very closely to the ones that I come up with, having worked in these areas for over 20 years. If you're a legitimate thinker, a critical thinker, you haven't signed off to blind loyalty to a cause or a politician or a letter in the alphabet, or any of these types of people. If you have blind loyalty, there's nothing I can say right now. You'd probably be really pissed off right now because I've been talking about Q and I've been talking about this Judy lady that was in Plandemic. But if you're a critical thinker and you've listened to what I've said and you reflect back on that stuff, you'll start to see it, which you probably saw it before. Another great example is what I just was reading a little while ago, that the CDC, let me see if once I start talking, I lose track of these stories. But the CDC, that's obviously not it. The CDC is saying that there may be, if I can find this freaking story here. Oh, I know where it was. Okay, hold on. Let's see here. I'll pull up another browser window and type this in. Easy enough. I just go back to the Liberal Drudge Report. So there is the story that the CDC is now saying that 5 million, if we don't social distance properly as the country opens back up, that there's going to be 5 million Americans infected and 290,000 will die by the end of July. That's if we don't social distance correctly. And this is a forecast coming from the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School model. Isn't that a business school? Anyway, that predicts COVID-19 will reach 5.4 million and the death toll could be 290,000. So these are experts of some sort. The CDC, Wharton School, that's where Trump went to business school. These people are so-called experts. But it's quite apparent that the experts in the field of the COVID virus aren't quite experts. We've had doctors telling us that, the world was going to end, and researchers saying that this was going to, this is attuned to the Spanish flu and was going to kill millions or 5% of the population, which would be a huge number, folks. We had doctors that told us the truth about the virus, saying that it is a real virus and it does kill. I told you I had it, right? I'm not an expert in infectious diseases, but I had it. So I know the reality of it. Somebody who's very close to me died from it. Another neighbor who's 48 years old died from it. So when I listen to these experts that say it's real and they explain it in a non-leaning way. In other words, they don't have a narrative behind it to either accuse the president of something or as the two doctors that also had another video out that everybody was sharing, they obviously had a business agenda to open the country back up. And I'm not criticizing him for that, although the one guy that was on there was probably he just looked like a smart ass, and I didn't like his attitude because the way he came off, and this guy's supposed to be a doctor, the way he was demeaning the virus was as if people like myself who've had it or the people who died from it either weren't, it's only a few micro percentages of people, so it's not a big deal. We shouldn't shut the place down or keep it closed or whatever. You could see the minimization of the reality of the disease, and then his structuring of the conversation to show how important it is that they open it back up because doctors are not allowed to be opening their business and doing their job, which I guess that's the case where he lives, but it's not the case in other places. I mean, most people were not being allowed to go to hospitals because they were afraid that they would get COVID when they went there because it was all over these places, all over these hospitals. But, and you may agree with me or disagree with me on those people, but the point I'm trying to get at here is that when we look at experts like this story with the CDC, you can again use your experience in life and the culmination of information that's coming at you, the totality of the information. You can start to see where motivations lie in the information that's coming to you as it has to do with COVID. There's been a couple of videos out recently from doctors who are flat out, unbelievable in how clear they are in the reality of this virus and how it differs from politics. And the way they lay it out is unbelievable. And when you compare that, there's no minimization. It's pointing out facts and the disturbance of politics in allowing people to do their medical job of actually curing people or helping them, and how the potential is there for more sick people if we don't open the country up. So the point of this whole thing, and I hope you're getting this out of this, is that you're smart enough to understand legitimacy. Typically, when somebody is legit and somebody is honest, you're not going to be having major arguments with other people about them on social media or at the dinner table. Unless the person that you're talking to is just an extremist, a zealot. And that may be the case. But when you look at the stories and you say, well, I don't go to liberal websites. Well, maybe you should go to them. Look at the stories and see if you can pick out the real story under there. Just like this one that was talking about how the Democrats are going to lay it to the Republicans because they keep, or if they keep siding with Trump in the stuff that has to do with the budgets. So I hope that helps you out so you can see how this stuff unfolds. There is a lot of things in the news that we can talk about. The Flynn stuff, the stuff that Catherine Herridge is talking about. I went and looked at, but before I get to that point, I want to make sure that you're clear on this. I want to make sure that you're understanding where I'm coming from. I didn't want to just rag on the pandemic video. I think that's come and gone. I didn't want to just sit on there and talk about my stories and how I can figure these things out. The whole point of all of this throughout this first 3 quarters of this podcast is because I keep looking at these stories and I see a lot of, on the conservative sites, I see a lot of conservative clickbait stories that you read. You're not really going to learn a lot out of it. A lot of it affirms what you believe. And because the agenda there is not driven by proving Trump is an idiot or Nancy Pelosi is evil. On conservative websites, good conservative websites, the stories are aimed at you, the conservative, because this might be something that you want to read. Now, that's the same thing on liberal sites. But on liberal sites, what I find is they're just more inflammatory. And the majority of the story has to do with how much they hate Trump and not about like a social program that a liberal might like. It's not about that. It's all hardwired with hatred for Trump and the conservatives. So take the time and go look at these liberal websites and see if you can pick some stuff out, because you actually might be able to really get some good insight. And a lot of times, like when they're writing about, or it's what they don't write about, for instance, the stuff with Comey and Susan Rice, all you see is liberal media attacking Catherine Herridge when she's been the straightest shooter of all of them there. But the sheer fact that they're attacking her shows me that she's onto something. It's always like that in the media when the left media is involved, or they just don't even cover it. Joe Biden and the sexual assault allegations. I reflect back on Kavanaugh and this crazy, strange woman that comes out of nowhere, and that's all they talked about. Or think about this. When Trump said that Rosie O'Donnell was fat, the left went crazy. Media talked about it constantly. Rosie O'Donnell is obese. And I can say that now. I mean, not that I couldn't say it before, but I don't have to worry about ramifications. Anybody comes at me now, I'll say, hey, listen, your Lord and Master, Nancy Pelosi, was on TV talking about how morbidly obese Trump is. And the only reason she was saying that is because she's trying to play the insult game. What she doesn't realize is that when Trump insults, a lot of the times, most of the time, it's satire. When she said it, she's literally pointing out physical characteristics that they say we can't say. And comics can't say, or people can't say. You can't say that, you can't say that, I don't know, so-and-so is crazy. You can't say something because she should shut her mouth because what? Because she's a woman, you're going to tell her to shut her mouth? No, would that be better? It should shut its mouth because it doesn't know what it's talking about. They'll turn around, and in the case of Nancy Pelosi, she used this derogatory term, pointing at, which I'm not sure if it's a derogatory term, but it's we've been told that it's fat shaming if you point out that somebody's obese. I don't even know where I'm going with this. Hold on. Let me go back here. Hold on one second here. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Now I remember. I could have edited all that out, but, leave it in. But where I'm going at with this is that Nancy Pelosi said that. It just disappeared in media. Trump says something about Rosie O'Donnell's weight. It goes crazy in media. That's a very telling thing. The absence of information about a certain subject will quite often actually show you that they either screwed up and oops, and then they just get real quiet, like if you were in an elevator and something slipped out and you're just going to sit there like, instead of saying, excuse me, you try to act like it must have been seeping through the wall. Not that that's ever happened to me, but when the sheer fact that they don't say anything is often very telling. Or in the case of when they go after Catherine Herridge, saying that, that she's reporting this stuff because she's, comes from Fox News or whatever, then that she's on to something. You can have this same type of insight when you look at the leftist media and you keep these investigative techniques in your mind, and you're actually going to be able to see a lot. And I really hope that the people that consider themselves, well, they may not consider themselves zealots, but they're zealots, or they follow with blind allegiance. I hope you listen to this, and I hope that you sit back and say, instead of jumping down my throat on social media, that you sit back and you say, you know what? Let me sit back and look at this. Let me sit back. Because, the other thing is, you don't know any of these people. You don't. Check out what I say. I tell people all the time, don't just take my word for it. You can listen to me and you can say, okay, he sounds like he knows what he's doing. Let me look into this a little bit. But don't just take my word for it. I don't want anybody to, first of all, I don't want anybody to follow me. I guess that's what they call it in social media now, but I don't mind being a voice of reason or voice of truth. I don't need anybody to follow me. I'm no savior. I am a legitimate servant to freedom who's got a lot of experience in a lot of different things. There's door kickers that are tremendously miles ahead. Rob O'Neill, that guy, amazing operator as a SEAL. My operation capacity in the SEALs was 5 years. Not to say that 99.999% of all human populations will never experience what we experienced in that 5 years. But, Rob O'Neill spent 18 years kicking doors. I was an investigator. I didn't take down Gotti, but I did some pretty good investigations while I was in the Bureau and stuff, and so on and so forth, all the other things that I've done. But you don't have to have my experience level to make these right decisions. Now, I do want to move on a little bit before I conclude the show, because there is a very telling thing, and it has to do with all these things that we've been talking about. Let me pull it up here. So, I don't know if I've told you guys this, but Richard Grinnell is and this isn't the story I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to point this out. I met Rich Grinnell years ago when the Benghazi guys came, remember after Bergdahl did what he did. Well, the guys that were in his platoon, they came out and they were on Fox News, and I got to meet them, ate dinner with them and Sean Hannity, and Rich Grinnell was there, and was an attorney. This is after he had worked as a spokesperson at the UN for years, and then was canned by Mitt Romney. Long story short, I had a little incident with Rich Grinnell, and he's a pompous, arrogant ass. Okay, I'll say it to you that way, right? I don't think he's a nice guy at all. He was very disrespectful to me because he thought I was trying to take his clients away from him. I'm not an agent. I just was trying to help fellow veterans get on the radio because I had access to Sirius, and didn't know that Rich Grinnell was their agent. And somebody chopped him in on an email, and then next thing I know, he's calling me a liar on this email in front of a bunch of people. And I called him on the phone, and he said a few choice words to me as though he's king of the world. And I've heard other things about him at the UN, how he was a total jerk to people and demeaned people and tried to dominate people. It is what it is. All that aside, I'm man enough to say that well, I don't think he's experienced at all. Does not even come close to having the experience to be in the position that he's in. I'll say that as well. Publicly, I think he's a terrible choice for the job that the president put him in the intelligence community. He's not an intel guy. Why aren't we putting intel people in intel? So anyway, same thing with the FBI. Why do we keep bringing lawyers from the DOJ to run the FBI? Let an FBI agent run the FBI. So as you can clearly see, I don't have a high opinion of Rich Grinnell. And maybe if he came up to me and we sat down and had a beer, that might change. But right now, it stands as it is. However, I'm man enough to say that, hot damn, that guy is freaking, he is declassifying. I don't know who they have in there pulling these things out, but he is going through and he is declassifying the right stuff. And one of those things that I want to point out is this email that Susan Rice emailed to herself. And it's like reading a kid's diary as you go through it. And I'm pulling it up right now so I can read it. I'll see if it pulls up. So this is in the picture that I have. It cuts it off at the very end. But listen, first of all, there's only certain reasons why and this was classified top secret, right? There's only certain reasons that you're going to write yourself an email to remind yourself of something. I think that's basically the only one, the thing that you do. Maybe sometimes if somebody forwards you or sends you some information that you get, you may want to make some notes about it and send that so you have that stuff on there. So, have some information that you gathered, so you send that to yourself. A lot of times, though, if somebody emails themselves the way this is written, it's because they know it's going to be found later on. And this reads like, it's just very odd. It's very odd. It reads like a diary, and it reads like something that a guilty person would write so that they 100% sound credible and don't have any guilt. So when I talk about minimizing, which I was talking about earlier, this sounds like total minimization. So this is Susan Rice writing herself. And it was on January, she says on January 5th, and the date on this is, she sent it to herself January 20th, 2017 at 12:15 p.m. in the afternoon. Received at 1 second later. On January 5th, this is how it starts. On January 5th, following a briefing by IC leadership on Russian hacking during the 2016 presidential election, President Obama had a brief follow-on conversation with FBI Director Jim Comey and Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates in the Oval Office. Vice President Biden and I were also present. This just sounds like a diary entry. President Obama began the conversation by stressing his continued commitment to ensuring that every aspect of this issue is handled by the intelligence and law enforcement communities by the book, end quotes. The president stressed that he is not asking about initiating or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. He reiterated that our law enforcement team needs to proceed as it normally would by the book. Again, like it's in a diary, or like a guilty person knowing that this is going to be found later. In case things come up, it can be found. From a national security perspective, however, President Obama said he wants to be sure that as we engage with the incoming team, we are mindful to ascertain if there is any reason that we cannot share information fully as it relates to Russia. So she wants to put that caveat in there because she's making it sound like they had real suspicion at this point. Director Comey affirmed, and we know how credible he is. I mean, the guy leaked information to cause a special investigation that they would use false information that they knowingly created to get a FISA. Okay, so he's totally credible. Director Comey affirmed that he is proceeding again, quote, by the book, that's another thing. If somebody keeps repeating something over and over again like that, most of the time it's because they're either really trying to make the point to you or they're trying to convince you of that. So Director Comey affirmed that he is proceeding, quote unquote, by the book as it relates to law enforcement. From a national security perspective, Comey said he does have some concerns that incoming NSA Flynn is speaking frequently with Russian Ambassador Kislyak. Now, this is on a side note. This is me talking, not in here. I've said over and over and over again, if you have a source and you continuously have that source engage with this person, then you can turn it around and say that Flynn is consistently meeting with this guy, when all along those meetings were being planned by the investigators. Do you see where I'm coming from? I don't know if Flynn was reaching out to this guy and they were meeting. I don't know, but it could be. And the reason I say it could be, it's not like I like to go down rabbit holes. It could be that Comey and Strzok and Page, or maybe it was Strzok and Page, or maybe it's just Strzok, somebody, or maybe it was a source of theirs, knew somebody who knows this ambassador and kept pushing them to have meetings so that they could record the meetings and then question Flynn about certain things that are really kind of not abstract, but are kind of elusive in a person's memory. Like, several years later, did you meet on this date? And you may or may not, you may think it was on Friday and it was on Wednesday. So that possibility is here. And the only reason I bring that possibility up is not because I think the Bureau is corrupt or full of corrupt people. There are corrupt people in the Bureau. There's corrupt people in every law enforcement agency. But based on their track record over the past 4 years, that's a possibility. And I see source all over this stuff. I see, and I've said this all along since 2016 as this thing started to unfold. I used to have conversations with other agents, or I'd be on television. I kept saying, this is too clean. There is never an investigation where somebody says, damn, I wish we had some blood spatter. And all of a sudden, their phone immediately rings and says, we got blood spatter. That never happens in an investigation. It doesn't. And maybe it happens once, but it doesn't happen all over again and again and again. I wish we had the clothes that she was murdered in. Ring, ring. Sarge, we just got the clothes she was murdered in. That just doesn't happen. But it seemed to have happened all along in this investigation against Trump and Flynn, and everything was always perfect. That is that old saying, it's too good to be true. It's exactly what it is. Let me finish with this real quick, and then we'll be done. Comey said that could be an issue as it relates to sharing sensitive information, talking about Flynn's meeting with Kislyak. President Obama asked if Comey was saying that the NSC should not pass sensitive information related to Russia to Flynn. Flynn, and this is me talking here, not the memo. Flynn is the incoming or one of the incoming people that works, the NSA, National Security Advisor, that works for the president, the incoming president. And the sitting president is talking about, should we or should we not pass this information? If it was that bad, if there was even a hint of suspicion, and these people were all on the up and up that are in FBI and the DOJ and the previous administration, I would think they would shut this stuff down immediately and say, we are not going to risk, because this is what I would do as a team guy, as a SEAL. I would say, listen, we're not going to risk the security of this nation. We're going to go and we're going to throw this down right now and find out what's going on. I mean, he's still a president. But the way they make this sound is, well, we don't know, but we can't be sure. He sure meets with the guy a lot, so we can't really give him, maybe we shouldn't give him any information. So Comey had replied to this. Comey replied, potentially. So potentially we'll withhold sensitive information from the National Security Advisor. He added that he has no indication thus far that Flynn has passed classified information to Kislyak. I mean, I don't know why she would write this to herself. unless she's trying to keep herself out of trouble if something goes down. And that could be the case. Her and whoever there was one other person on this, Curtis Reed, that was on this. That's who was CC'd. I don't know. Very, very strange. Very strange. But Catherine Herridge is reporting this stuff, and she's doing an amazing job of it. Again, I'm going to keep looking at this, and I want you to keep looking at it as well from that perspective that I told you about through this whole show. Now, I want to say one other thing before I go, and it has to do with law enforcement. I have been in many different areas of law enforcement. State, I was at Camp Robinson Police Department, Federal Air Marshal, security contractor. I'm not just saying this so that you know if you've listened to this over and over again. Security contractor, working with Homeland Security. Wasn't in law enforcement at that point, but we were going out and doing threat assessments all over the country. I skipped over the SEAL teams. That wasn't law enforcement, but still in the SEAL teams. And in the FBI. And in all those times of working in law enforcement and in government, I can honestly say I met a lot of tool bags that I wouldn't want to be around. But I never met somebody that I thought, with my training and experience, that they were a spy or that they would go out of their way to fictitiously create or to create a fictitious piece of evidence to frame somebody. I never, ever worked with people like that. And I was in all those agencies, state and federal. The truth is, there's great people in law enforcement that wake up every day and do the right things for the right reasons. And they love the Constitution. But there is a lot of shady stuff going on right now. There is more and more issues of, and I just experienced this the other day. There's more and more issues of dudes flexing their muscles and forgetting that if somebody's not doing a crime, there's no legal reason and no law enforcement reason for them to, for those cops, I'm trying to put this in the right way. There's no reason for them to have such attitude, especially right now. They need to get on Team Citizen and forget about team politics. They need to get on Team Constitution, which is a team captain for Team America. And they need, and I'm saying you all that are cops out there. I know I'm not trying to preach the choir of people who wake up and do the right thing, the good and righteous servants of freedom. But I go down to film some stuff for Frogman Down, Memorial Toast 2020 or Toast to the Brotherhood 2020. That's going to be Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can go to frogmandown.org, click on the link. But I go to the World Trade Center to do some recordings for that because we have to do it virtually. So I had to record some stuff. And there was a Port Authority officer standing by one of the pools. They're made in the footprint of where the Twin Towers used to be, these two giant pools. And it's dead quiet out there. There is no one else. There's one other security guard. It's like 6 o'clock in the evening. Myself and one other person. And I'm not kidding when I say there's nobody else around. There were cars driving by, but there are no people around. The entire area of the World Trade Center is completely vacant. And so I see the guy over there on his phone, wasn't even acknowledging that we were there. Okay. First of all, if you're a cop and you put on a badge and a gun, maybe I know you're going to have times where you're going to want to check your phone and things like that, but your job is to be on all the time. I mean, this is New York, by the way. Terrorist attack. He's leaning against a pool that is the footprint of a building that was knocked down and thousands of people were killed by terrorists. 3 blocks away, another terrorist killed a bunch of people with a vehicle. And this guy, I'll know there's nobody around. I get it. There's nobody around, but he's on his phone in that area. You should be like the freaking Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, on guard all the time. You never know in New York what's going to happen. Some guy could come running by there with a machete and just chop him right in the head. And I didn't see anybody else around there. Now, we're probably on camera because that's down there in the the iron ring or whatever they call it, but where they can see all this stuff. But I look over at him. I said, excuse me, brother. Now, right off the bat, most people don't talk like that unless they've been in law enforcement. I'm wearing a suit and nobody else is around. So obviously I'm doing something. And I said, excuse me, brother. And you could see, he saw me out of the corner of his eye. I said, excuse me, brother. And he turns around and I said, hey, officer, can I ask you a question? He's like, yeah, what's up? So he starts to walk towards me, and I said, and he's still a good 30 yards away from me. I said, hey, listen, I'm filming this thing for Frogman Down. It's a memorial toast they do every year for the SEALs and Navy SEALs. And I just want to film right here if I could, but I can't, because they had it all roped off. You can't just go down there right now. I said, is there any way I could just stand right there, 15 feet away? Is there any way I could stand right there next to the pool so I have that in the background while I just film literally 15 seconds? And he's like, no, I'm not, I can't let anybody come over here. That was the extent of the emotion out of him, knowing, that that I'm doing this for a veterans organization, and it's Memorial Day week, right? Until somebody else whose relative works for the Port Authority, who happens to know some of the people that I'm with, incredible person, says, hey, this relative of mine's with Port Authority. You think we could get him over there just to film this? And he's like, okay. Okay, first of all, totally unprofessional in the way that he handled that whole situation. I almost just want to walk off and say, I don't need it. I'm not going to, have you. I just told the guy the reality of what I was doing for veterans, for SEALs, fallen heroes, and he wouldn't let me over there. 15 feet away, right or wrong, against the rules or whatever. But and obviously it wasn't that bad against the rules, because the other person came up that knew somebody from the Port Authority. So they, he's like, oh, okay. So he lets me over there. That was the extent. Like, hey, thank you for your service. I said, thank you, to him. Thank you for all you guys are doing out here. But what is this all about with law enforcement? It's always been a good old boy thing down the South. I have stories. I remember one time as a kid, we went to a concert down by the river in Little Rock. I wasn't a kid, but I wasn't out of high school yet. And my mom goes, she took us down there, and I can't remember who was in concert there, but they had a blanket right down. We got there early, so they could put a blanket right down by the stage where the concert was going to be. It's an amphitheater. And a guy walks up and says, hey, you've got to move. And she's like, what do you mean? We've been here for hours. And he's like, no. And he shows her a badge. He goes, with Sheriff's Department, you got to leave. You got to get out of here. Making it sound like it was for official business. Now, this is under what's called the color of law, where you pretend that you're using your official position to do unofficial things. And that's basically what he did. We were like, seriously? And so we all had to get up. We lost our seat. At that point, we're now pushed out of the crowd because there was no other place for us to be. And he had his wife or girlfriend there. I'm sure these things have always existed, right? I was never like that. Never. And I can say that. And the majority of people that I worked with, I would say would never have done something like that. I'm sure there's people that I worked with that were tool bags like that. But what is happening in law enforcement that this is becoming more and more prevalent? Listen, I'm not an activist against cops by any means. I'm pro-cop. I was pro-cop. But I'm watching videos of Upper East Side 3 days ago in New York City, and two NYPD officers. I know the guy was probably unruly. There's a group of people outside the bars, standing outside on the sidewalk, talking and meeting because they're kind of informal protests, like, you're not going to make us stay inside. And I'm sure they came up there, and the guy was probably loud and obnoxious. They start to cuff him. I did not see any evidence as this guy was going full bore fighting with these guys. He's giving them a hard time to cuff him. There's no doubt about it. This other cop picks the guy up. I don't know if both his hands were cuffed yet or not, but I'm pretty sure at least one of them were. Picks him up and slams him so hard on his neck and shoulder that he knocks the guy completely out. The whole crowd thought he was dead. What is happening in law enforcement? I watched this story, the guy I was talking about at the beginning of the show, who owns a gym down in it's either North or South Carolina, and he's a former Marine, and the acting chief, who's also a former Marine, enters his gym without a warrant because there was people working out in there with a city council person and one other person, using a card that was from the city, because I think this gym is like a 24-hour gym where you can swipe your card and go in there and work out. And so there was people in there working out. And so they come in there with this card that was not issued to them into a private business with no warrant and walk in and start telling people to get out of the gym. They're going to get ticketed. Then with the detective starts taking pictures of their faces and of the license plates of the car. And when he was questioned, he drove off, rolled his window up and drove off. What is happening in law enforcement? The other thing, I saw another gym in New Jersey, Belmore, New Jersey. And you have the good cops come up because people were out there protesting from this gym because they wanted to open it up and work out. Most of them had masks on. The cop comes up and says, I want you to listen. You know, there's executive order saying you can't be here, but on today, I don't see anybody doing anything that's going to cause, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but basically saying that, you know, you're not killing anybody. I'm not going to come down on you because you're not coming down on me. You're not coming down on the law. You're exercising your constitutional rights. So I'm out of here. And he leaves. Then the next thing you know, they give the gym owner a ticket, and then they roll up and arrest another gym patron. And I'm hearing stories of these police departments rolling up like they're on a SWAT mission. I mean, and this isn't like Texas where the guys are standing around a bar with guns, okay? Which I still think that was ridiculous. The whole way that thing was escalated. I'm hearing about no-knock warrants down in Louisiana, and how they rightfully or not, a woman that was an EMT, I believe, in one of these towns down in Louisiana. I don't know if she was dealing drugs or whatever, but I would assume that if they're going to get a no-knock warrant, that there's some serious stuff going on. There's serious evidence of trafficking. There's serious evidence that they have a ton of drugs in there. They say they knocked, but it was a no-knock warrant, and they didn't know they were coming, and they get into a shootout. Now, to me, unless it's imminent, now I'm not going to go into the legal stuff here, but if there's no imminent, and I saw this a lot doing surveillance, if there's no imminent threat, then why don't you just sit on the house and wait for them to leave and arrest him? Same thing happened with David Koresh. You know, they could have arrested that guy dozens of times when he was in town. They never arrested him. They waited so they can get all amped up and serve a warrant, and the shooting begins. And in the case down in Louisiana, you know, there's reports they went to the wrong address. I guess that's not the case. There were reports that her name wasn't on the warrant. That's not the case. Her name was on the warrant. It was the right address. Either they tried to go in or they knocked on the door. They didn't know what was going on. The boyfriend identifies somebody out there. They get into a shootout, and the cops are shooting through windows where the curtains are closed, and they killed the woman. Again, doesn't matter if they're guilty or not, or drug dealers or not. What are those tactics all about? What's happened? I watched a UPS truck being chased by cops. I think that was in California several months ago. And I hate using these terms, but what a shit show that was. Chasing a UPS truck. They don't ever use helicopters with snipers. I mean, we use those in the military all the time. You train somebody on how to do it. It's very effective. They They follow these people forever and ever until they get them in a location like they did, like the Keystone Cops, surround the vehicle and start shooting. I don't know how they ended up. I remember ragging on the French when they had a terrorist incident, how they were aiming at each other and shooting at the bad guy. They did the same thing at this location and ended up killing a person. Not just the bad guy, killing somebody else just happened to be driving by. I'm asking this a rhetorical question when I say what's happening. I mean, this is all a fact because of politics, because good cops are suppressed. I'm telling you, I know people are going to be like, no, that's not true. It's true. And it's even in federal law enforcement. I know somebody who is the king of 302. 302s are like our report that we write after we do an interview or something goes down. We'll write a 302. You hear that word in the media all the time now. He was the king at writing 302s. This guy would stay Friday night and write 302s, and like there's like books. And his squad hated him for that. I mean, that's odd to me. I mean, you got a guy who's like that. You know what I'd be doing? I'd be saying, Dan, help me out with my 302s, because he could just whip those things out like crazy. But those people are suppressed. Good cops, people who have ambition and are like, hey, can we try this tactic? Or let's train with some airsoft weapons, so we can save money but still get the training. Go to airsoft thing with our squad. They won't do it. Cops won't do it. They think the person who has the energy and the gumption to try new things is stupid. So they suppress them. They promote weirdos like this sheriff that's in Van Buren County in Arkansas. Worthless sheriff's department, worthless sheriff. They won't. He comes from another law enforcement agency and was on a drug task force. And let me just tell you, these drug task force filled with these people. Again, not all cops are bad, but I'm just telling you what's happening in law enforcement. Totally politicized, suppressing good cops, promoting incompetent ladder climbers. And because of back in the Clinton era, affirmative action, that set the precedent for hiring people based on quotas. We need more black men or gay women or whatever it is that they want, other than a white male, it seems like. They will hire them to get the numbers. And listen, you may be, I don't care if you're black or white or gay or straight. You should be very concerned if you get a job based on that. If you show up and you're qualified, fully qualified for that job, then you should be given an equal opportunity to try for that job. And if you score better than somebody, then you should get the job. But if you're, extremely, as Nancy Pelosi would say, morbidly obese, which happened to me at a police department, and we try out and I break the record for their physical fitness run, and I scored extremely high and all the rest of it with 2 college degrees, and I don't get in, but somebody who is morbidly obese but has was a minority and a she got hired. If you're comfortable with that, I mean, if I was her, I would not be comfortable with that, because that means that the person that's going with you on a call may be just like you, worthless and not capable of doing their job. And that's the norm now. There's like, they'll hire 5 great people and then hire 7 people that because they fit a quota. This is what's happened to law enforcement. And so now you'll have people who show up, and there's men and women both who are great officers. Not contrary to what people believe, not every woman that's a cop, when they respond to a call, is going to get their ass beat down or they're not capable of doing stuff. There's some great female cops that will go to town. There's one, the one detective that was on the criminal side of the house in the task force in the FBI, because we all NYPD detectives. All my partners were NYPD detectives. They taught me how to be cops. God bless them. She was fierce. But you don't want to work in an environment where people are being hired to fill a quota. But that's what's happening. That's what's happening. A lot of women are hired because they're women. Because they're women. And why would you put somebody in a physically challenging job that could mean life or death? Same thing with firefighting. There's women, some great female firefighters, but there's a lot of women in firefighting that could not carry a sack of potatoes, let alone a 250-pound man. I don't want to go to a neurosurgeon that was able to pass their board for a quota. I don't want to have a cop come and respond to my call, or if I'm, trying to film something, the World Trade Center, that got a job because they filled a quota. Because that's the attitude that you're going to get. That's why these things are happening. I keep asking the question rhetorically, what's going on? But that's what's going on. Promoting the wrong people. Politics are too involved in law enforcement. You have that good old boy system that still exists in a lot of places. And law enforcement in and of itself attracts great people who love their country, just like the military, and then some of the biggest jerks in the world, because that's how they feel good about themselves. Yelling and screaming and just, how David Chappelle, on his Dave Chappelle show, when he used to do those things about keeping it real, these people keep it real all the time, but they have a badge. And so they can yell and scream and punch people and do whatever they want. And those are somehow the people who get promoted a lot of the times because they're worthless. They're worthless and nobody wants to work with them. So they get promoted and then they get in charge. So I hope there's cops that are listening to this. And if you see something I put on social media, I'm standing for you. Even though I'm criticizing law enforcement, I'm still standing for the good guys. I'm standing for law enforcement in general. But like I said today on Twitter, this should hit home for everybody. Here's the facts. Here's the truth. Law enforcement in general, across the board, there's only two groups of people that can fix the problem that's going on in law enforcement right now. One is the citizens. And two is law enforcement themselves. I don't care what you have to do. Protest yourself. Get 40 people together and stand up for what's right. Get rid of your crappy chiefs and your lieutenants or your new officers that are worthless and stand together for that. And what you'll find is that the citizens will stand with you. But trust me, you don't want option number one, because if we ever go to that point where the citizenry says we're standing against the cops, that is not going to end well. That, my friends, is the truth. I love all my first responder buddies, brothers, sisters. I stand with you. And I'm here to help you fix it. All you got to do is ask. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace. And we're out of here.